Ex-homeless Redditors, what was the scariest thing that you ever saw on the streets? Kids beating the shit out of a homeless man. Started with them spitting on him. He gets up and runs after them. Then a couple of them hit him from behind with some IKEA-looking wood. You know, the one that snaps easy. He gets mad and they run off. He comes back to the bench and falls asleep again. 10 minutes later they're back and they just start beating the fucking shit out of him. I had to jump in and stop them. Honestly, the first night really outside. Everything is scary. I've been homeless for about 4 months some years ago. At first I could stay with friends, but I didn't want to overstay my welcome. I'd actually lie to them, telling them I've got some place to go to. Luckily, in those 4 months I only had to really sleep outside for about 2 weeks. The first scary thing was just finding where to sleep, where people can't see me and it's relatively dry. Then when I finally found places to sleep, first was in a park between some bushes, second was in a tiny playhouse in a public playground, 3D was under a bridge, and then again some nights in the park between bushes. I was constantly worried about people seeing me. The other scary thing was every single sound. A car drives by slowly. Are they going to hurt me? Some drunks in the distance singing. If they see me, they'll definitely are going to fuck around with me and be idiots. The next scary thing was the cold. I would only sleep very lightly for about 30 minutes at a time and wake up shivering. I was 19, 1 meter 80. I think that's about 6 feet, and 95 kgs. 190 pounds. So not a small guy. And I was scared as hell. I imagine it's so much worse for women. My best advice would be, don't be an idiot and ask for help. Although it was extremely tempting, I didn't abuse drugs or alcohol. I didn't look homeless. I was just a big idiot thinking I can fix this by myself. I don't want to impose on people, etc. I was 19 back then. I'm 33 now and I'm happily married and we have a nice home. Not that scary, but one time I was on a park bench just killing time. This homeless dude that everyone called Red was at another bench. He came up to mine and asked if I would watch his shit while he slept for a bit, and I said yes. So he lay down next to me, and after a while he sat up for a cigarette. About 3 drags in, he starts coughing and his face turned all purple fast. Never realized how fast people turn purple from lack of oxygen. He fell over on his side, and I jumped up and gave him a little smack on the back a few times, and I kept yelling at him to get up. I was hesitant to call an ambulance cause of hospital bills that he obviously wouldn't be able to pay, but right as I took my phone out to call, he had been unconscious for like 30 seconds at this point. He starts gasping and gets up. I asked him if he was okay, and all he says is fucking COPD and then takes a drag of the cigarette that he never even dropped the whole time that happened. Blows my mind he didn't drop it, Lemeo. The scariest thing I saw was a man named Tony T. Apparently he had been a cokehead for years, but had to keep a job to support his habit. He had received a huge settlement, over $500K, at which point he decided that he never had to work again. He lived on the streets and smoked cocaine all day. The best way to describe him is Tuco from Breaking Bad. He was generous with his drugs so people would naturally want to be around him. But he was unpredictable and dangerous. I have tons of stories about him being crazy aggressive, but the last time I saw him he beat a man with a pipe for dropping a tiny crack rock in the dirt. We are talking like $20 worth of dope, and he probably either killed the guy or fucked him up for life. I tried to stop him and he threatened to turn on me. I walked out, went to a phone and called my sister to come get me. She helped me get my shit together and I never went back. That was 30 years ago. Cold weather. I thought I was going to die one night. I was so cold. I remember waking up thinking you need to move or you are going to die. This was the scariest thing for me. I ended up sleeping in buses, burning sterno. It's like jelly rubbing alcohol that burns for a good while. I would try to constantly be walking cause if I stopped I'd probably fall asleep and die. I also sometimes rested under a bridge from time to time. One time I fell asleep under the bridge, and I woke up finally feeling warm and cozy, and thought it was nice to finally be able to rest. Then I realized that it's way too cold for this, and I can't move without that frozen fingers pain everywhere. Struggled real hard to get my sterno out, and could barely bend my fingers enough to let it. Like my hands were nearly useless. I'm really glad I woke up. Lots of stabbings and rapes. I was stalked by a gang one night on my way home from work. I still have no idea how I wasn't raped or mugged. Once I woke up suddenly to a not homeless man holding a huge knife, staring at me inside the abandoned building's basement I was sleeping in. Once he noticed I was awake, he asked if I was Russian. I said no, and he said he was looking for a different girl, gave me $20 and left. Edit. If you can read this and immediately think yes, it's the best idea to send this woman disgustingly perverse messages and ask for nudes. I hope your dick stay flaccid for eternity. Not what I saw. What I heard. If that counts. For a while I slept in an empty warehouse. I'm in the UK. So it was a huge Victorian building with about 6 floors. I slept on the 3rd or 4th floor, out of the way of casual intruders. Drunks and prostitutes used that space. And one night I heard a load of shouting and a female screaming from the ground floor. Now I was 16, a junkie and about 120 pounds, so I wasn't in any position to do much, but I crept down the steps to see what was happening. By the time I got there, the place was empty and the noise had stopped, so I went back upstairs. I found out the next day they found a body in the wasteland outside. Turns out the woman was a prostitute. They assumed her client stabbed her after a struggle, and she'd made a run for it before he caught her and finished the job. Always wonder if I'd been able to help. But I'd have probably got stabbed too. Snow. I'm a big, scary dude, so I never had trouble with people picking on me or whatever. In that sense, the streets were safe to me. But seeing snow for the first time that year just made me cry and panic. It was too early for snow. I wasn't ready for that type of cold and was hoping to be on my feet again before the winter came. Beautiful thing like snow just fucked me up in so many ways. I had been homeless for a couple weeks now and had made friends with this couple. They seemed pretty chill but had a bit of a drinking problem. Anyway, one night I was sleeping, could hear some commotion going on, couldn't make out who it was or what was going on, until my buddy comes and sits on my sleeping bag, blood pumping out of his neck, like full on. Every time his heart beat it would splurt out, not under huge pressure, but it was pretty bad. I asked him what happened and he said he think his missus had cut his throat with a Stanley blade. He was so drunk he was not aware of how bad his injury was, and insisted I did not call an ambulance. So I called the police. They called the ambulance. I see the dude a couple days later, still homeless, scar on his neck. He's ever so grateful the nurse had told him how lucky he was. He was literally a couple millimeters away from dying that night. There is a drainage ditch in my area that the local homeless people tend to bed down in. A few years ago, when I found myself destitute, I spent one night down there. That night, I witnessed a Molotov get thrown into another dude's spot, which led to a huge fire that ran rampant through the area. Yeah, I bought a tent the next day and started camping in the local mountains. In my years being a homeless junkie, and then cleaning up kinda and working at a homeless shelter on the street, I saw a dude try to murder his girlfriend with a machete. Like full on swing and barely miss, and my heart was fucking pounding like I was sure I was about to witness a murder. I also saw countless ODs and shit. Saw a girl beaten to shit who had just been raped asking for help. Saw a dude get stabbed. Saw a big huge dude have a heart attack and die and the paramedics frantically trying to give him chest compressions and shit, and he was just flopping around. Saw a lot of shit, honestly, but those were the ones that come to mind as scaring the shit out of me the most. I have a million stories from those years and half sound fake cause they are so ridiculous. After a meal at a local shelter one night I fell asleep in a park. I hated being around there at night because some of the other homeless would rob you. One guy got knifed a week earlier and I needed to GTFO. So I started to make my way out of the area, taking alleyways as not to attract the drunks who would throw shit at, beat up and generally harass the destitute. I heard a commotion and decided to investigate and saw this crazy animal of a man, naked from the waist down, on top of someone, I assume a woman, thrusting on top of her. Every couple of seconds he would stop to throw a punch. The woman was unconscious, completely limp and very bloody. I yelled out to him and he turned to look at me. I have seen a lot of bad things in my life, but the look in his eyes was beyond animalistic. He was filthy, but in the little light from the street lamps, his eyes glowed with rage and insanity. Scared the shit out of me. So afraid that I took off. Ran to nearest payphone, 1993, and dialed 911. I did not go back. I have felt like such a coward and have no idea what happened to either one. I truly hope she's okay and he is dead. So I lived in my car, but I remember seeing this woman and talking to her outside a store when I was just chilling eating some food, and she told me she had been homeless literally her entire life and had never slept on a proper bed in her life. I asked how old she was. She told me she was 53. It was scary to me because I realized that could have easily been me. I think about that woman every single day. I was staying in a homeless shelter that had a men's side and a woman's side. Most of the men were convicted sex offenders. In the 8 months I spent in that hell on earth, I was friends with 3 women who were raped by some of these men. The truly scary thing? The women were actively discouraged from telling anyone what had happened, especially the police. If they filed a report with the police, they were permanently barred from the shelter. That place, one of the most celebrated in my state, regularly has the mayor and governor drop by, is the most evil place on earth. This isn't remotely scary. It's more just fucked up. After we lost our home, we stayed in a motel for a while, but due to occupancy rules, I slept in the car in the parking lot. One night a woman parks next to me in the lot, and the security guard shows up. And they literally spent the next 3 hours getting high, talking, and then fucking in the car. The entire time I'm in the next parking space trying to ignore them and look at my phone. Life pro tip: if a random drug dealer asks you for a ride home, don't say yes. If you do say yes, have extra keys with you. Almost got raped after driving a random drug dealer I bought drugs from home. Dude stole my keys out of the ignition and said he needed his dick wet if I wanted my keys back. Pretended to start crying to make things awkward. He got out of the car with my keys. Locked doors. Got my spare keys out and floored it out of there. I was working in a mountain town and couldn't afford rent. Even with 2 jobs. One night I was wasted after work. Me and a work friend were always there by ourselves, closing so the bar was for game. Left work at 2 a.m. walked the hour and a half back to my tent outside of town. While being stalked by a mountain lion, I assume I looked injured and could be an easy meal. It was terrifying. I had a digital camera with me, so I just kept pointing it in the area of the ridge where I could hear it walking and flashed repeatedly. Made it home safe. Another night after closing, different campsite, I must have smelled like a huge gyro after working at Double at Pitas in Paradise. Got into my sleeping bag in my tent. I was just about to doze off when I heard big crunches of a black bear sniffing me out. I was frozen with terror. The bear put his about against the nylon inches above my head. Hot steam on my face. I had pulled the sleeping bag up to my cheeks, petrified, when I slapped the bear's nose above my forehead. It was an involuntary reaction, and I felt stupid, but I spooked the bear, and it took off. I got an apartment with some friends soon after. All sorts of the usual shit. Dicey situations with dicey people. But the one where I was spine-chilling terrified. I had found a seemingly nice quiet cut in the woods. Shade. Private. I'm set. I wake up to a most guttural yowl at 2 a.m. A pack of feral cats that the adjacent 50-year-old Rainman had lured to his property with cans of wet food. They stood on the fence yelling, eyes reflecting as we stared the other down. Waking up to a shotgun being pointed directly at my head. I wasn't truly homeless, but had no money or bank card, and was trying to get back to my parents following nearly being strangled to death by my ex. The actual fight happened whilst we were out, so I had no spare, no clothes. I'd left my wallet at his and only had a dying phone on me. I tried getting money for a train, but only really managed enough for a bus fare to the next town, and decided to try hitchhiking. Late into the night, I gave up and managed to sneak into a barn, where I was able to get comfortable enough to sleep. Turns out I didn't close the door enough, and the farmer found me in the morning after taking his gun to investigate. He woke me up. I think he coughed loudly, with the gun pointed at me, and I nearly shat myself. It asked me what I thought I was doing in his barn, and quizzed me on how I got in. He asked to see my arms before he lowered the gun, and he started chatting. He was quite nice though, and after talking to him for a while he took me back to his house and fed me, and let me have a shower. I wasn't really homeless, but I had to live in my car on and off for a couple months, in a mountain town due to scarcity of work available at the time. Woke up in the middle of the night, to a black bear that was curious trying to get in. I was homeless back when I was 19. After a few weeks of sleeping rough, I was approached one evening by a man dressed as a priest. At this point I had no idea if he was a priest or someone out to deceive me. Being wary of the priest outfit, I straight away told him, I have no interest in talking about God. What he said next is stuck with me ever since. I am not here to talk about God. I'm here to make sure you are safe. We talked for quite a while until it was dark, and that's when he offered me a bed for the night. Alarm bells were going off in my head, but he had seemed genuine, so I went with him. He drove me to a house in the suburbs and asked me to wait in his car whilst he spoke to someone. A few minutes later, he returned with another man who offered to let me sleep in his garage for the night. Everything inside me was saying this is a bad idea, but I accepted as I had nothing left to lose. The garage was pretty standard. Tools, workbench, etc. Except in the corner there was a box spring and some blankets. There was a connecting door to the main house that the man told me he would have to keep locked during the night. He apologized but said he had kids in the house and couldn't take the risk. The priest asked if he could come by in the morning and speak to me, then went into the house. The man. I don't think I slept at all that night. I was terrified. I had no reason to be afraid of either man, as they had been nothing but nice to me. However, after living on the streets for a while, you come to learn that nothing comes for free, and you shouldn't trust anyone. The morning rolls around and the most amazing thing happened. The man knocked on his own garage door to ask me if he could come in. This might not sound amazing, but when you've been living rough with zero privacy, someone asking if they can enter your space, which is actually his space, gives you a sense of being human again. Someone actually respects you enough to ask your permission. I spoke with both him and the priest every day for the 7 weeks I slept in his garage. Between them, they managed to get me into a subsidized efficiency apartment. Think studio apartment, but a lot smaller, got me a job and helped me get my life back on track. That was over 20 years ago, and I will also be indebted to both of them. I still send Christmas cards to the man whose garage was my home and visited him 2 years ago for Thanksgiving. Sadly, the priest passed away a few years back, but I guarantee that if there is a heaven, he got fast-tracked in.